She heard him before she saw him. No black doctors. He was clear. Dr. Vivian Caldwell was already in her gloves when she pushed through the bay door. She was a cardiothoracic surgeon at St. Elias Private Medical Center in Manhattan. 11 years, 43 commendations. A surgical record that put her at the top of every measurable category in her field. She was black, she was brilliant, and she was the only cardiac surgeon in the building at 2:17 a.m. when Do-Yoon Choi, known in certain circles as Frost, head of one of New York's most dangerous Korean criminal networks, was brought in bleeding from a gunshot wound to the left chest. The man's lieutenant said he was clear. No black doctors. Vivian walked in anyway. Do-Yoon opened his mouth. She said, "You can find your preferences when you're not bleeding out." And she worked for 4.5 hours, and she saved his life, and she didn't ask for a single thing in return. What happened after that was not a love story. It was not a redemption story. It was something older and stranger than either of those. A story about a debt, about the particular cost of a prejudice stated as fact, and about what happens when the woman you dismissed without knowing her is already, without knowing it herself, holding the one thing in the world you cannot lose, but what she found inside that sealed envelope. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The letter was still warm from the printer when James Whitmore slid it across his desk. Vivian Caldwell did not look at it right away. She looked at his hands, pale, composed, the hands of a man who had done before and would do it again without losing a night of sleep. And she decided she would not give him the satisfaction of watching her face while she read. She read it anyway. 3 paragraphs. The complaint had been reviewed by an independent panel. The panel had found the evidence insufficient to support a finding of discriminatory conduct. The ruling would be shared with relevant staff by Thursday morning. She was thanked for bringing the matter to the institution's attention. 11 years. She had been at St. Elias Private Medical Center for 11 years. She had built a surgical record that should have made the promotion automatic. Every outcome documented, every commendation filed, every difficult case taken and survived and turned into data that said, "This woman is the best cardiothoracic surgeon in this building and possibly in this borough." She had done it the right way, through the right channels, with the right evidence. Richard Bauer had become chief of cardiothoracic surgery because he had 15 years of seniority and because institutions like St. Elias do not change their fundamental nature without being dragged. She folded the letter in thirds and put it in her left coat pocket. "Thank you for telling me yourself," she said. Whitmore nodded with the careful relief of a man who had prepared for worse. He said something about the process. She stood up before he finished and closed the door behind her. She took the stairs down 4 flights. The elevator felt like a place where she might have a feeling she could not afford on a night. She still had 18 hours of work ahead of her. The cardiac floor smelled like disinfectant and floor wax and the cold recycled air that made her nostrils ache every winter. She clocked in at 9:02 p.m. for a shift that ran to 7 a.m. She had already been in the building since noon. The letter stayed in her coat pocket. She left it there like a stone she was not ready to put down. Her first surgery that night was a mitral valve repair. A 61-year-old woman from the Upper Side referred by 3 different cardiologists before one of them admitted he was out of his depth. The woman had 2 adult daughters in the waiting room since 6 o'clock. Vivian had spoken to them before scrubbing in, looked at both of them, told them what she was going to do, and what the likelihood of each complication was. She did not promise a specific outcome. She told them the truth, and the truth was that she was very good at what she was about to do. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes. She closed the chest herself. She did not think about the letter once. By midnight, she had cleared 2 more consultations, updated 6 charts, and eaten half a granola bar standing at the nurse's station. The hospital was in that particular late-night quiet. Not silence, but the muted version of itself. The version that ran on overnight staff and emergency voltage. Vivian liked this version. There was less performance in it. At 12:40 a.m., she called the Newark Care Facility. Her mother answered on the 5th ring, her voice thick with sleep and something slower than it had been 6 months ago. They talked for 9 minutes. Her mother asked about the complaint. Vivian said it was still in process. Her mother said, "You're the best doctor in that building, and they know it." Vivian said, "Get some sleep, Mama." She did not tell her about the letter. She was not ready. At 1:30 a.m., she was at the nurse's station updating a post-operative note when Phyllis touched her arm. Phyllis had been the charge nurse on cardiac nights for 16 years. She did not use the word urgent. She said, "Private entrance, bad one." Vivian did not ask how bad. She already knew what Phyllis meant by bad. The private entrance was a separate bay at the rear of the building, accessible by coded keypad and used for patients who required specific discretion. Over 11 years, Vivian had treated 4 patients there who were connected to organized crime. She had reported all 4, exactly as required by law. She had done her job and let the legal system do its job, and she had never lost sleep over the intersection. She put on gloves as she walked. She heard him before she saw the patient. A low voice, tightly controlled, speaking in clipped sentences. He was clear, no black doctors. Get someone else. The intake nurse, Yolanda, 26, 2 months out of her nursing degree, was standing with her back nearly against the wall. The man speaking to her was compact and wide-shouldered, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, and he had the controlled stillness of someone practiced at making people comply without needing volume. Vivian pushed through the bay door. The patient was on the gurney, conscious, barely, a black turtleneck with a spreading dark stain near the left shoulder, tailored charcoal trousers, a platinum watch on his wrist with the face cracked clean across, Korean, 40s, lean and precise in build even in the collapse of his body. He turned his head when she entered, tracking her with dark eyes that were still cataloging despite everything, and he opened his mouth. She said, "You can find your preferences when you're not bleeding out." She pulled the overhead light into position and did not wait for a response. The bullet had entered below the left clavicle at a steep downward angle. The shooter had the high ground, possibly a parking structure level above. The exit wound on the posterior confirmed the round had passed through without lodging, which was the only piece of good news in the room. The impact had caused significant vascular trauma. Blood pressure was dropping in a way that would become unrecoverable within the next 8 minutes unless she was right about exactly what she was doing. She was. She called for a thoracic tray. O negative, Dr. Puri for anesthesia. She spoke in the compressed, information-dense language of emergency cardiac work. A language she had spent her entire adult life learning to speak without hesitation, without the half-second of doubt that she had watched kill 2 patients in her residency under less capable hands. The wide-shouldered man, Danny Park, she would learn later, stepped back against the wall when she came through the door. He did not leave. She registered this in the peripheral space where surgeons track the room. He stayed, which meant the patient's survival meant more to him than the patient's instructions. She filed it. The patient did not lose consciousness until the anesthesia took him. Before it did, he watched her, not with weight or assessment. He watched her the way she had seen people watch the single person in a room they could not categorize. The way a controlled man looks when the world has briefly exceeded his architecture. She did not look back. She had work to do. She worked for 4 hours and 21 minutes. The critical repair was a 2-centimeter tear in the left subclavian artery in a space that did not cooperate with a field that kept trying to fill faster than she could manage it. There was one moment, 90 minutes in, when she heard her own breath change. Not panic, not the precursor to panic, but the particular shift of alertness that tells a surgeon they have reached the section that separates sufficient from exceptional. And she breathed through it deliberately and kept her hands still and did what the work required. At 6:38 a.m., she stripped off her gloves and walked to the sink. Danny Park was in the hallway outside the OR. He looked, for the first time, like someone who had been afraid. "He's stable," she said. 72 hours minimum in recovery. I'll be monitoring him personally. He said nothing for a moment. Then he won't like that. "I know," she said. She picked up the post-op chart and began writing. She did not mention that Dr. Bauer, the on-call attending who should have taken this case, had been unreachable for the entire night. She did not mention the 2 calls that went to voicemail or the text at 4:11 a.m. explaining a family situation, which was what Richard Bauer always said, and which always meant one particular thing that everyone in the building understood and no one put in writing. She walked back to the cardiac floor, updated charts, changed into a fresh attending coat, and drank a cup of coffee that had been sitting on the counter long enough to be almost cold. She thought about the letter in her coat pocket. She thought about her mother's voice at 12:40 a.m., thick with sleep and certainty. "You're the best doctor in that building, and they know it." At 7:05 a.m., she took the elevator to the parking structure. She sat in her car for 4 minutes before she started it. She drove home, ate a bowl of cereal over the kitchen sink, and slept with the afternoon light coming through the curtains she hadn't closed. The letter was in her coat pocket on the chair by the door when she woke up. Danny Park did not sleep. He sat in the private recovery suite's anteroom with his phone in his left hand, his right hand resting on his knee, and he waited. A man who works in proximity to violence long enough learns to read the specific quality of stillness that follows it. The difference between the quiet of resolution and the quiet of complication. This quiet was neither. It was the quiet of something that had not finished yet. At 9:14 a.m., Do-yoon Choi opened his eyes. He was in a private room with cream walls and a window facing south. The Manhattan skyline a suggestion behind frosted glass. There was a monitor tracking his vitals with a soft metronomic chirp, an IV line in his left arm, a bandaged chest that told him, with its specific weight, exactly what had happened and roughly how close it had been. He lay still for 60 seconds, taking inventory. Then he said, "Get me a different doctor." Danny Park looked at him. "She already saved your life." Do-yoon said nothing. "Bauer was unavailable," Danny said. "She was the only one in the building. She went in for 4.5 hours. He paused. "Do-yoon, she saved your life." Do-yoon stared at the ceiling. The monitor chirped. Outside the frosted window, the morning was bright and cold and indifferent. "Get me the file on her," he said. Vivian returned to St. Elias at 3 p.m. to check post-operative vitals on the mitral valve patient from the previous night. She was not scheduled. She came because she had woken up at 2:30 p.m. with the particular low-grade alertness of a surgeon who is not entirely confident about a specific valve seal, and because the only way to resolve it was to go and see. The seal was fine. She updated the chart and was heading for the elevator when her pager went off. Private recovery suite, 4th floor, the new admission. She took the stairs. He was awake, sitting up at a careful angle, the monitoring equipment arranged around him with the precision of someone who had rearranged it as much as the IV line would allow. His eyes moved to her when she came in the door. The neck tattoo, the koi fish in traditional brushstroke ink, was visible above the hospital gown collar. Dr. Caldwell, he said. She had not told him her name. Yes, she said. She picked up his chart. You know who I am. She looked at the chart. Do-yoon Choi. You go by Frost in certain circles. You've been at St. Elias twice before, once for a laceration repair in 2019, once for a broken hand in 2021, both private entrance, both reported as required. She turned a page. Your blood pressure is low but acceptable. Your oxygen saturation is good. You're going to feel that shoulder for 6 to 8 weeks, and you're going to be significantly limited in your upper body mobility for the first 3. He watched her through the entirety of this. You reported the other 2 cases, he said. I did. You didn't report last night. She set the chart down. I was in surgery for 4.5 hours. The 24-hour reporting window closed at 2:17 a.m. I was not able to file within that window. She looked at him directly. I will be filing today. He held her gaze. Something in his face. Not softening exactly, but recalibrating. The calculation of a man who had expected one thing and received something that required a different kind of attention. What do you want? He said. Not a question. For you to rest, she said, and she picked up the chart again and made her notes, and she did not look at him until she was done. The file Danny Park assembled on Vivian Caldwell took 3 hours. Do-yoon read it in 40 minutes, lying in a hospital bed with the chart tilted against his knees because sitting fully upright still caused a pulling sensation he did not trust. Graduated Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, top of her class. Residency at Columbia Presbyterian. Fellowship in minimally invasive cardiac surgery at the Cleveland Clinic. Hired at St. Elias 11 years ago as a junior attending. Promoted to senior attending 6 years later. Published in 4 peer-reviewed journals. 43 commendations on record. 0 malpractice claims. 0 patient complaints. A performance record that was, by any objective measurement, exceptional. Then a gap. A discrimination complaint filed 8 months ago against Dr. Richard Bauer, alleging that her promotion to Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery had been blocked on the basis of race. The complaint was still in internal review. The file didn't say what Do-yoon had already, through a different channel, confirmed. The review had concluded yesterday. The complaint had been dismissed. He set the file face down on the blanket. He thought about her hands, the particular economy of movement that surgeons develop. Nothing wasted, nothing performed, everything in service of the next thing. And the way she had moved through the trauma bay without checking whether anyone was going to comply. She had not asked for permission, she had not paused, she had done the work. He thought about what he had said. He had said it clearly and early, the way he said everything. No ambiguity, no revision, a preference stated as a perimeter. He had been saying it for years. He had never, in those years, been required to examine it. The complaint was dismissed, he told Danny. Danny, standing at the window, said, I know, find out why. On the second day of his recovery, James Whitmore came to the private suite. Vivian was mid-chart when Whitmore knocked, opened the door without waiting, and looked between her and Do-yoon with the careful neutrality of a man managing a situation he had not fully anticipated. He wanted to speak with her in the hallway. She set the chart down and followed him out. We're going to be reassigning Mr. Choi's care, Whitmore said quietly, with the slightly flattened affect of someone reading from a prepared script. Dr. Bauer will be taking over as the primary attending. Vivian looked at him. Doctor, Bauer has been unavailable for the past 36 hours. He's available now. The patient is 48 hours post-op from emergency vascular repair. Continuity of care in the first 72 hours is, Dr. Caldwell. Whitmore lowered his voice further. The patient's legal team has requested the reassignment She understood. She had understood before he said it. And the hospital is complying. The hospital is managing the situation. She said nothing. She looked past Whitmore at the hallway. The cream walls, the overhead fluorescents, the nurse's station at the end with Phyllis filing a chart, and the quiet institutional machinery that had been running against her for a year and a half and would continue to run. "I'll finish the current round of post-op checks," she said. "Vivian." "I'll finish the current round," she said, and went back inside. Doyoon looked at her when she came back in. She picked up the chart. She checked the vitals. She made her notes. She was nearly done when he said, "What did he want?" "To reassign your care." "And you said that I'd finished the current round." She snapped the chart closed. "Your blood pressure has improved. Oxygen saturation is normal. Your shoulder needs another 48 hours before I'd be comfortable reducing the monitoring frequency." "Sit down," he said. She stayed standing. "Please," he said. The word came out like something he had not used in a long time. She looked at him for a moment. She sat in the chair beside the bed. He said, "I looked at your file. I assumed—" "Your complaint." She said nothing. "The panel was managed," he said. "2 of the 3 panelists have existing relationships with St. Elias's board. Whitmore put them in place. It was not an independent review." He paused. "I had my people look at it this morning." She held his gaze. She did not say, "Why?" She did not say, "What are you doing?" She looked at him, and he looked at her, and the monitor chirped, and outside the frosted window, the city moved without noticing either of them. "I reported gunshot wounds twice before," she said. "I'll file on yours today, as I told you." "I know," he said. "That's not what I'm talking about." She stood up. She picked up the chart. At the door, she stopped and turned. "I don't want anything from you," she said, "just so we're clear." "I know that too," he said. She left. On the morning of the 3rd day, Detective Frank Malone arrived. He came with a warrant and a lieutenant, and the particular confident stride of a man who had spent 3 years waiting for an opening. He met with Whitmore first. Vivian learned this from Phyllis, who learned it from the receptionist who had checked them in. The meeting lasted 22 minutes. Malone came out of Whitmore's office looking like a man who had gotten what he wanted. He found Vivian in the hallway. The warrant, he explained, was for Do-Yoon Choi's medical records, but there was also the matter of the failure to report. The 24-hour window. Vivian's filing had gone in at 9:47 a.m. on day 2, 17 hours after the window closed, a violation of mandatory reporting law. Minimum penalty, suspension of medical license pending review. Maximum penalty at the board's discretion. Vivian stood with her hands loose at her sides and her face still and let him explain it completely. "Mr. Whitmore has indicated that the hospital's legal team will not be defending the staff member in question," Malone said. His voice was not unkind. "I thought you should know where they stand before the formal process begins." "Thank you," she said. She walked to the end of the hallway and pushed through the door to the stairwell and stood there for 3 minutes with her back against the cold cinder block. Then she went back to work. The envelope arrived at 2:40 p.m. Malone's lieutenant was still on the floor, waiting for the legal team's response to the warrant. Whitmore was in his office with the door closed. The hallway outside the private recovery suite was unusually quiet. Danny Park stepped off the elevator. He walked to Malone's lieutenant, a young detective named Cruz, and handed him a sealed folder. Cruz looked at it. He opened it. He read the first page and looked up, and whatever was on his face was not what he had expected to feel. He called Malone. Vivian learned what was in the folder from Phyllis, who had a particular talent for information that moved through corridors. The folder contained 3 years of personnel records from St. Elias's HR system, specifically performance reviews signed by Dr. Richard Bauer for Dr. Vivian Caldwell. reviews that had been digitally altered, the originals, recovered through a data backup system that Bauer had apparently not known existed, showed scores and evaluations that were substantially different from what had been filed. The differential was sufficient to demonstrate that the promotion decision had been engineered. The data had come from Do Yoon's network. They had it because Richard Bauer had a gambling problem and a relationship with a private lender who had, for 4 years, been connected to Choi Meridian Group's financial infrastructure. Malone's warrant was withdrawn at 4:15 p.m. Do-yoon said nothing when Vivian came in for the evening vitals check. She said nothing either. She checked his blood pressure, improving. Oxygen saturation, normal. The shoulder incision, healing without sign of infection. She was at the door when she stopped. "You didn't do that for me," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "No," he said. She looked at him. He looked back. The monitor chirped. The light through the frosted window had gone from afternoon amber to the flat gray of early evening. "Why did you do it?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of a man who didn't know. The silence of a man deciding how honest to be. "Because you didn't owe me anything," he said. "And you saved my life anyway. That matters to me." She left without answering. In the hallway, she stood still for 4 seconds, her hand flat against the wall. And then she walked back to the nurse's station and finished her shift. The story broke at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. Vivian did not see it until she was already on the subway. She was looking at her phone for something else. The Newark facility had sent a notification about her mother's latest PT assessment. When the push alert appeared from a medical industry news site she had followed in her residency and never unfollowed. Saint. Elias surgeon treats known crime figure, fails to report shooting. Her photograph was the header image. It was her hospital ID photo, the one she had taken her first year when she was 27, and still looked like someone surprised to be there. She read the article on the platform at 86th Street, standing with commuters moving past her in both directions. The piece had her name, her title, her years at the hospital, the 2-day delay in reporting, and a quote from an unnamed hospital source describing the circumstances as deeply troubling. It did not name Do-yoon. It referred to him as a patient with documented ties to organized crime. It mentioned that Saint, Elias's administrative team, was reviewing the incident. It mentioned her discrimination complaint, noted as previously dismissed by an independent panel, as context for the atmosphere of her employment. She put her phone in her coat pocket. She stood on the platform for one more train interval and then got on. Whitmore called her at 6:47 a.m. before she reached the hospital. He did not say he was sorry. He said that in light of the media attention, and given the institution's need to manage public perception during an already complex period, and in consideration of the unresolved reporting matter, the hospital would be placing her on immediate administrative leave, effective today. She would need to surrender her badge and access card before leaving the building. She said, "I understand." She said it the way she said things she did not understand at all. The facility director at the Newark Care Home called at 7:04 a.m. Her mother's insurance coverage was tied to Vivian's active employment. With the leave effective immediately, the coverage had lapsed. They would need to begin the transfer process to a county facility within 72 hours if an alternative arrangement could not be confirmed. They were very sorry. They understood this was not ideal timing. Vivian said, "I'll figure it out." She walked the 2 remaining blocks to St. Elias. Phyllis was at the nurse's station. She saw Vivian's face and stood up immediately and said, "I know." She came around the desk and Vivian held up one hand. Not no, exactly, but not yet, and Phyllis stopped and let her go to her office. The office was smaller than it should have been for 11 years. She had never hung personal photographs on the walls. Just her licenses and her degree, and a small card from a patient's family that said you gave us more time in handwriting, that slanted slightly left. She took the card down and put it in her coat pocket. She took the licenses off the wall and stacked them on the desk. She did not take the white attending coat. It belonged to the hospital. She packed the rest in 12 minutes, a box that held a decade and a career and the evidence of what she had tried to do the right way. She carried it to the elevator. On the 4th floor, the indicator light above the elevator showed someone descending from the recovery suites. She didn't wait. She took the stairs. In the parking structure, she put the box in the back of her car and got into the driver's seat and closed the door. The parking structure was quiet. Fluorescent lights, the sound of distant traffic from the street level. She could smell the cold concrete and the faint exhaust from an early morning shift change. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the gray wall in front of her car, and she thought about her mother's voice at 12:40 a.m., thick with sleep. "You're the best doctor in that building, and they know it." She did not cry. She was not built for it in this kind of moment. The crying came later, sometimes much later, after the adrenaline and the control were gone and the body remembered it had been in a fight. Right now she sat and let herself feel the full weight of what had happened, which was considerable. And she did not move for 2 hours. At 10:30 a.m., she drove to Newark. Her mother was in the sunroom when she arrived, at a small table near the east window with a cup of tea and a chessboard set up mid-game. There was no one else at the table. The chair across from her mother was pushed back at an angle, like someone had stepped away and would be back. Her mother looked up, and her face did the thing it always did, the particular softening of a woman who had not lost the capacity to be glad, no matter what was happening around her. "You look tired," her mother said. "I'm fine," Vivian said. She sat in the chair by the window, not at the chess table. Her mother looked at her for a long moment with the eyes of a woman who had raised her alone and knew every register of her face. She said, "You don't have to tell me." "I know," Vivian said. "You will when you're ready." "I know," she said again. Her mother reached over and put her hand on Vivian's arm. The hand was thinner than it had been 6 months ago, the knuckles more prominent, but the grip was still the grip that had held her through every exam and every failure and every specific grief that had come between the beginning and here. They sat. After a while, her mother said, "I was playing chess with Cora this morning. She's getting very good. She beat me last Tuesday." "Who's Cora?" Vivian said. "A little girl. 12. She's been here about 2 years. She came without any family. Poor thing. We play on Sundays, mostly, but sometimes in the week when she can't sleep." Her mother lifted her teacup. Sharp as a tack. She sees patterns. "I told her she should be an engineer." A pause. "Or a doctor." Vivian looked at the chessboard. The pieces were mid-game. Black had advanced aggressively in the center. White was playing defense through the queenside. Whoever had been playing white had a steady, patient style. "Does she have anyone?" Vivian said. "She has me," her mother said, in the tone of a woman for whom that was a complete answer. Vivian drove home in late afternoon light. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and opened her bank account and looked at the numbers for a long time. Student debt at $280,000. Monthly minimum on the interest alone, $1,847. Her mother's care facility. $4,200 per month. Insurance covered 60%, the rest from her salary. With the leave effective today, the salary was gone. She had 9 weeks of savings if she was careful. After that, nothing. She opened the discrimination complaint documents she had saved locally. She opened the folder with the Bauer evidence. The data Danny Park had delivered through Malone. The original performance reviews that proved what had been done. She had copies. She had not been the only one in the chain of custody. She called an attorney. Not a hospital attorney, An outside attorney, a woman named Dara Hollins, who had a reputation in medical discrimination cases and who had been mentioned to Vivian 6 months ago by someone who thought she might need her. Vivian had written the name down and then put it away because she still believed 6 months ago that the institution would correct itself. The institution had not corrected itself. Dara Hollins picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. "I read the news this morning." "Then you know the situation," Vivian said. "I know what they put in the news," Dara said. "Tell me what actually happened." Vivian told her everything. The complaint, the dismissal, the night of the surgery, the Bauer documents, the morning's administrative leave, the article with her photograph. She told it in the order it happened, in plain language without inflection. She was trained to present facts without editorializing. She was very good at it. When she was done, Dara Hollins said, "The Bauer documents, you have them independently?" "Yes." "How solid is the chain?" "Solid enough for a state medical board complaint. Solid enough for civil action." Dara was quiet for a moment. "The source of those documents is going to come up." "I know." "You're prepared for that?" Vivian looked out the kitchen window. The evening was coming in fast, the sky going from pale gray to the deeper gray that precedes real dark. She thought about Do-yoon Choi in a hospital bed, watching her. She thought about what he had said. "Because you didn't owe me anything, and you saved my life anyway. That matters to me." "I'm prepared," she said. She was in bed by 9 o'clock, awake until past midnight. The discrimination complaint would be in Dara Hollins's hands by morning. The state board filing would follow. The civil lawsuit, Bauer, Saint, Elias Whitmore individually, would take longer to build, but was already in Vivian's mind built. She had spent 11 years in an institution that had taught her to document everything, and she had documented everything. But her mother's transfer notice was still active. 72 hours from 7:04 a.m. She looked at the ceiling in the dark and ran the numbers again, and the numbers came out the same way they had every other time she had run them. There was no version where the savings covered the gap. She had no more moves. It was the first time she had thought that and fully believed it, and it stayed with her in the dark until very late. And then she fell asleep anyway because her body was smarter than her fear. The knock came at 8:47 p.m. the following evening. Vivian was at her kitchen table with the Hollins documents and a cold cup of coffee when she heard it. She went to the door and looked through the peephole. Danny Park stood in the hallway in a black crewneck and dark trousers, his right hand at his side, and a large sealed envelope in his left. She opened the door. "He said you should read this tonight," Danny said. She looked at him. She looked at the envelope. She took it. She closed the door and sat back down at the kitchen table, and she opened it. The first document was a trust account statement. A private trust, registered in the state of New Jersey, opened 12 years ago. Monthly contributions from a Delaware LLC. Meridian Private Holdings, totaling $214,000 over 12 years, paid consistently, never missed. The account name, Cora Park Trust. The beneficiary, Cora Park, date of birth listed as February 3rd, 14 years prior, now 12. The second document was a facility intake record from the Hawthorne Care Facility, Newark, New Jersey. Cora Park, aged 12. Admitted 2 years and 4 months ago following the death of her mother. Status, minor ward, no legal guardian named. Under emergency medical authorization. Dorothy Caldwell, patient of the same facility, listed as informal caregiver and medical proxy. Vivian read her mother's name twice. The third document was a transaction record. 26 months ago, Do-yoon's accounting firm, responding to a routine trust monitoring request, had flagged that the Cora Park Trust's care coordination showed an unusual informal arrangement. An unrelated elderly resident of the same facility was signing medical approval forms for the child, attending school conferences, and serving as de facto next of kin with no legal standing. The accounting firm had flagged this as a potential legal exposure for the trust. Du-Yoon had reviewed the flag. He had confirmed the situation. He had extended the trust's coverage to include Dorothy Caldwell's care costs, quietly, through the same shell company, effective the following month. He did not know Dorothy Caldwell's daughter was a surgeon. He did not know the surgeon's name was Vivian. He did not know until 5 days ago, when he lay bleeding in a trauma bay in Manhattan, that the woman who had been caring for his daughter in Newark was the mother of the woman who would save his life. Vivian sat at her kitchen table for a long time. She thought about Sunday afternoons. Her mother, on the phone, mentioning chess games with a little girl. "She's getting very good. She beat me last Tuesday. I told her she should be an engineer or a doctor." Her mother's hand on Cora's medication approvals month after month, because there was no one else, and her mother had never in her life walked past someone who needed someone. She thought about money appearing in the care facility's account 2 years ago. The director had told her at the time that an anonymous donor had covered a shortfall. She had been grateful and had not asked questions. She had been grateful every month since. She sat with all of this and let it become real at the pace it needed to become real. Then she put everything back in the envelope very carefully, and she sat in her kitchen, in the quiet, and she let herself cry. Not for long. Just enough. She called Dara Hollins at 7 a.m. "Add the hospital board," she said. "Every member who approved Whitmore's panel selection. I want the full scope of liability mapped." "That's going to make it bigger," Dara said. "Good," Vivian said. The state medical board complaint was filed at 9:15 a.m. The civil lawsuit papers were submitted by end of day. By the following morning, the Bauer documents had been authenticated by an independent forensic data analyst, and the authentication report was attached to both filings. The story broke again, differently this time. A medical journalist at a national health publication had been tracking the original story and had sources inside the state board. Falsified performance reviews alleged at St. Elias Medical Center. Suspended surgeon files, civil action. The piece ran with Vivian's name and a photograph she had chosen herself, not the hospital ID. It ran with Dara Hollins's statement, which was precise and cold and surgical in exactly the way Vivian had asked it to be. By noon, 3 other St. Elias staff members had contacted Dara Hollins's office independently. The New York State Medical Board opened its investigation of Richard Bauer within 6 weeks. The investigation moved faster than these things typically move, because the authenticated records were unusually clear, because St. Elias' legal team had quietly begun cooperating to reduce the institution's own liability, and because 2 of the 3 board members who had been on Whitmore's independent panel had their own conflicts of interest that were now documented. Bauer was suspended pending review on a Tuesday morning. Vivian learned this by text from Phyllis, who had been sending daily updates from inside the building since the day of the administrative leave. St. Elias offered reinstatement the following Thursday. The offer came through Dara Hollins and was accompanied by a formal written acknowledgement of the discrimination complaint as valid and a settlement figure that Dara said was the upper range of what she had expected. Vivian read the restatement terms and the acknowledgement twice. She called her mother. "They gave it back," she said. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "They didn't give it back. You took it back. There's a difference." "Yes," Vivian said, "there is." She returned to the OR on a Monday morning in January. The cardiac floor smelled exactly as it had always smelled. Disinfectant, floor wax, cold recycled air. Phyllis was at the nurse's station, and she looked up and said nothing, and then said, "First case is at 8. Then she stood up and came around the desk and put her arms around Vivian briefly and stepped back and straightened her own uniform, and they both pretended that had not happened. Vivian changed into fresh scrubs. She put on the attending coat, a new one, from the locker they had assigned her. She put her stethoscope around her neck. She opened her locker to put her bag away. A sealed cream envelope was inside. She stood very still for a moment. Then she picked it up. Inside, a platinum Patek Philippe watch, the face still cracked from the fall in the parking structure. No note, no card, nothing written. Only the watch, cold and solid in her palm, and the cracked face that she now understood was not carelessness but precision. A thing that had been broken at the moment of a debt incurred, and was now returned, still broken, as acknowledgement that the debt was known. She held it for a long time. Then she put it in her coat pocket. In the left pocket, in the space where the Whitmore letter had been. She did not call him. She would not call him. She knew this with the certainty of someone who understands the precise shape of a door that should remain closed. Not because it would be dangerous, but because the thing on the other side of that door was not something either of them was built to hold without losing something else. He did not appear in the hallway. He did not come to the hospital. He sent no other messages. 2 days after she returned, the Hawthorne Care Facility in Newark received notification of a trust expansion. Dorothy Caldwell's care was secured for the next 15 years through a trust instrument that the facility director described, in a phone call to Vivian, as unusually thorough. The funding came through Meridian Private Holdings. 3 days after that, Cora Park's file at the facility was updated. A formal legal acknowledgement. Not a public record, not a court proceeding. Just a document held in a private attorney's office. Confirmed a paternity relationship and established a legal guardian designation for Cora, with a trust structured for her education and welfare through the age of 25. Vivian learned about Cora's file update from her mother, who had been told by the facility director, who said only that a family member had come forward. Her mother said, "Did you have something to do with this?" "No," Vivian said, "not directly." A pause. "Cora asked me who arranged it. I didn't know what to tell her." "Tell her someone who owed a debt paid it," Vivian said. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is that enough?" Vivian looked out her kitchen window. The winter light was low and clean, and came in at an angle that caught the watch on the kitchen table. She had left it there, out of the pocket for one evening, and made the cracked face catch the light in a way that was almost beautiful. "Yes," she said, "it's enough." She picked up the watch. She put it back in her coat pocket. She made a cup of tea and drank it standing at the sink, looking at the city. She went back to work the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning after. The crack in the watch face caught the light every time she checked the time in the OR. She never had it repaired. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever given everything you had, your skill, your time, your dignity, to a system that told you it wasn't enough and kept going anyway? Have you ever discovered that a stranger had been quietly holding something precious to you? Long before either of you knew the other existed? Have you ever stood in a room where someone tried to make you small and chose, without making it a performance, to simply be exactly who you are? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, hidden truth, and silent justice, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.